Okay, today's daf is, we're going to be learning Megillah, daf tepav, another long daf with many, many interesting drashot. Again, some familiar, some maybe less familiar. Today's daf is sponsored in honor of our dear friend Debbie Gvir from the Hadron Zoom family with prayers for a speedy recovery. We are in awe of her courageous and inspirational commitment to the daf through trials and tribulations. We also, today's daf is also sponsored by Jill Shames in honor of her 40th wedding anniversary and 25 years since making Aliyah. As it is with learning, so it is with life. The things that elevate us the most may not be easy, but they are so worth it. Today's daf is also sponsored by Ruki and Heshibillet in memory of Ruki's mother, Phyllis Katz, Fega Bat David Yaakov, Alah Shalom, on her 11th year at site. Mom was a courageous, charming, exciting, wise person and a lifelong learner. She would be so happy that a dozen of her descendants are learning Daf Yomi or studying Torah full time. We are now going to get started with the very top of our daf. We were a little bit off topic. We got into Rachav Azonah and how she, Rachav the prostitute, who ended up, according to the tradition, converted, married Yehoshua. And then the story is that she had 8 prophets that descended from her and possibly also Huldah, the prophetess. So now the Gemara says, Bishlama inu mifarshe, ela avatayu minala. Some on the list of these 8 Nevi'im, their names are explicitly mentioned in the Tanakh as being prophets. Okay, Rashi lists them. I don't want to go into all the details right now because we have a long daf and I want to get through. But you can look at Rashi. Some of them are listed and we have them by name as prophets. But their fathers, in other words, they're listed as the son of other ones listed on this list. So half of them are mentioned as prophets. Half of them are mentioned as the father of a prophet. So the answer Kede'ula, the Amar Ula, Komakom Sheshmo V'Shem Aviv B'Nevi'ut B'Yadu Hashu Navi Ben Navi. There's a rule that Ula says, and it works like this. If you're listed in the Torah as a prophet, son of a prophet, son of someone, sometimes people are listed without their father's name, sometimes they're listed with. They're listed with their father's name, then it means that they're the prophet, the son of a prophet. But Shmo V'Lo Shem Aviv, if they're listed without their father's name, then B'Yadu Hashu Navi V'Lo Ben Navi. So if you're a prophet and you're listed in the Torah and your father's name is not mentioned, that means that your father was not a prophet. So that's how we know, since all these prophets were listed, son of so-and-so, that must mean their father was a prophet. So by the way, and we'll see this in the continuation, is all of that, this idea that children follow their parents often, they don't always, and therefore the Torah has a way of marking that. When they follow their parents' ways, they're mentioned in the genealogy, right? We list them dating back to their parents. When they don't follow in their parents' ways, then we list them separately. And this is Litov Ulera, we're going to see, whether they follow in their bad footsteps or they follow in their good footsteps. So now they mentioned something else, which is B'Shem Iro Meforash. This is just about prophets. Shmo B'Shem Iro Meforash. If his name is listed and the city he came from, then obviously B'Yadu Hashu Me'al Taha'ir, then we know he came from that city. Shmo V'Lo Shem Iro, but if his name is mentioned, but not the city he came from, B'Yadu Hashu Me'Yerushalayim. The default is he came from Jerusalem. B'Manita Tana, another braita that's about this idea of the parents and the children and the fathers being mentioned or not. If we don't really know so much about the family, but one of them is mentioned in a good way, and they're listed as son of so-and-so, etc., then we know, we'll see in a minute, Kigon Dvar Hashem Asher Hayal Tzfanya ben Kushi ben Gedalia. B'Yadu Hashu Tzadik ben Tzadik. Tzfanya was a good prophet. He, therefore, is listed son of this, son of that. That means that his fathers were also good people, even though we don't know anything about them. If you're mentioned negatively, like for example, what did he do? You remember Yishmael? He kills, this isn't Yishmael in the Torah, it's Yishmael, he kills Gedalia ben Achikam, right? It's the first assassination in the Torah. B'Yadu Hashu Rasha ben Rasha, the only real assassination like that. So anyway, it's clear, since he's mentioned the lineage after his father and his grandfather, it must be they were also bad like he was, even though we don't really know anything about them. Right? This is just the way we in general, right? We assume the default is that parents follow their children, the children follow in their parents' footsteps for good and for bad. And therefore, we're going to see that, okay, I see. I'm going to get back to what you're saying, Gita. But basically, we're going to see that that if the Torah has a way of telling us whether they went off on their own track or they went on their parents' track, and that's by listing the genealogy. There are other assassinations. What I really meant is the assassination of a fellow Jew. Okay, I should be clear about that. Amar Rav Nachman, Malachi ze Mordechai. Okay, I don't know why this is, but there's a sense that we're going to see. There's two different opinions about who Malachi was. Okay, that he was one of the last of the prophets. Haggai, Zechariah, Malachi are always together as the last of the prophets. Question is he also somebody else? Can we identify him with another person? So Rav Nachman says, yes, in fact, he's Mordechai. Okay, because we know Mordechai, we have a tradition, he was a prophet, but he's not really mentioned in the book of prophets. So it must be, he's the same person as Malachi. It's what we call notrikon. It's like an abbreviation where Malachi is Mishneh, Lamed is Lamelech, right? With a chaf at the end like Melech. So Malachi is Mishneh Lamelech. And right, he was second in command to the king. That was Mordechai. So that's why he was called Malachi. But Meitive, we're going to bring a question against Rav Nachman. And remember that Rav Nachman says this because soon Rav Nachman is going to say Malachi was Ezra and not Mordechai. Meitive, but it says in a Braita, Baruch ben Neriah, Uschaya b'Masya, Daniel Mordechai Bilshan. Mordechai Bilshan is Mordechai or Mordechai. V'Chagai Zechariah Malachi. Kulam din dabu b'shat shtayim l'Daryavish. Here's a list of all the prophets that prophesied in the second year of Daryavish's reign. So now, what do you have? You have Mordechai on the list, and you have Malachi on the list. Clearly, they're not the same person. So Rav Nachman must have changed his mind because we'll see he changes his mind. He already says Ezra later, and therefore the Gemara says Tiyuvta, this really is a knockout to his opinion. Tanya, here we bring another Braita. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha Malachi ze Ezra. So first the Braita says it. V'chachamim omrim Malachi shmo. Chachamim say no, his real name is Malachi. Amar Rav Nachman mistaber kamanda Amar Malachi ze Ezra. Now all of a sudden he changes gears, and Rav Nachman says it seems like Ezra must be the one. And now he's going to say because they both had the same issue. Okay, now you might say just because a Navi, a prophet, talks about a similar issue as another prophet, doesn't really mean they're the same person. But he says, look, this was the big issue in their time, and they both talked about it. It must be they're the same person. Dichtiv b'nevuat Malachi, Bagda Yehuda v'toeva nasta b'Yisrael, right? They rebelled, they were traitors, the Judeans, and this despicable thing was done in Yisrael, b'Yerushalayim, ki chilel Yehuda kodesh Hashem asher ahev. They basically desecrated their God that they loved, u'ba'al bat el nechar, and they slept with non-Jewish women. Uman afrish nashim nochriot, who was the one who was known for separating the people from their Gentile wives. Ezra dichtiv vayan Shchania ben Yechiel mi ben Elam v'yomer leEzra anachnu ba'alnu b'Elokeinu v'noshev nashim nochriot. And then this whole thing that Ezra makes all the people who have nashim nochriot come, and he makes them divorce them, etc. So here you see Malachi and Ezra must be the same. Okay, what's the need to make Malachi into somebody else? I'm not sure. Okay, I'll leave that as a question. Tanu Rabbanan. Okay, now we're going to have a sugya that a little bit, right? Why are they discussing this? Right? Why are we talking about the beauty of women again, like the end of Ta'anit with the women and the beauty and the family and all that? But it says there are 4 women who were the most beautiful in the world. Who were they? And this is because by them is mentioned beauty. Okay, we'll see who the 4 are. Sarah, remember, Avram goes to Mitzrayim and he lies about her because he says she's beautiful and they're going to want her. Abigail. Okay, when David meets Abigail, it says, first of all, by the way, I just want you to know, for those who say it's all about beauty, the first thing it says about her is she has sechel tov. Okay, she was very smart. And then it says, and yifat Torah, or I forget exactly the words it uses. Okay, so she was also very beautiful. And Rachav Hazonah and Esther. Okay, Esther Malka, we know was beautiful. That was the whole thing. Achashverosh found her so beautiful, and that's why he chose her. Ulamanda Amar Esther Yorak Roka Taita. What about that, right? The one we saw on the Shabbat daf, right? That Esther was green. Well, she obviously wasn't beautiful if she was green. So Mapik Esther Ma'ayel Vashti. Okay, we're going to take Esther off the list and put in Vashti instead. Remember, according to that, it was a total miracle that he fell in love with her because, right, she wasn't beautiful at all. And it was really just miraculous that he ended up deciding to marry her. So Vashti comes in, and we know she had this beauty because that was the whole thing. Achashverosh wanted to show off her beauty. So, right, which now makes 2 on the list, not Jewish women, according to this. Although, remember, Rachav did convert according to the tradition. Okay, next. Tanu Rabbanan. now we're going to hear about all these beautiful women, and Rachav, now we're going to see about all these women and the problems their beauty caused other men. Again, this isn't exactly a sugya that's so easy to swallow, but Hanu Rabbanan, Rachav Bishma Zimta. Okay, she was a zonah, even in name. That really, what it really means is not that Zimta, but she caused men to basically get excited and have desire for her just by hearing her name. Okay, they'd hear Rachav and they'd already have desires for her. Ya'el Bekola, when people would hear, here we're adding, by the way, different women. Ya'el from Sefer Shoftim with Sisra, she in her voice, people heard her speaking and they'd be attracted to it. Avigail B'schirata, you would just mention her name or maybe remember her, and that would make you think about her. That was because, remember, she says to David, we saw this yesterday, remember me, right? Remember me, when basically saying that was her whole thing, that she was planning ahead when my husband dies. Michal Bat Shaul, we're adding another one to the list, Biri'iyata, and you would see her. So this list has 4 different women who were beautiful, right? She was beautiful when you'd see her. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Kol Omer Rachav, Rachav Miyad Nikre. If a man would hear the words Rachav, Rachav immediately, he would have semen come out. Amar Rav Nachman, Ana Amina Rachav, Rachav lo ichpat li. So Rav Nachman says, what are you talking about? This is just not true. I said Rachav, Rachav, and nothing happened. Okay, so what are you talking about? We actually had this entire sugya in Ta'anit in the beginning, if you recall. So Amar Lakika Amina biyodau b'makira. I don't mean you. You're living generations later. You didn't know Rachav from a hole in the wall, but yodau b'makira, that's someone who knew her and recognized her. He would say Rachav, Rachav, and already become very desirous of her. Okay, so we're basically distinguishing between people who lived in her generation and knew her rather than this. Okay, so yes, I already said we had in the last Masechet in the beginning of Ta'anit, it was on Daf He. Okay, so that was all because we were talking about these Neviot. It's very strange. I have to just put it out there that all, into the discussion about Neviot, and you think about these wonderful women who were prophetesses and had all this influence. We talked about Dvorah, how people were amazing in her time, and yet, right, they then go into the beauty of women, right? So they get off on this, right? I don't have a good answer for that. Okay, Mordechai yada et kol asher na'asa. So now we're going to get to the next section of the Megillah, okay, and we're going to start darshaning it. So to go through a little bit of the verses, okay, basically what happens, they basically send out the letters that they're going to kill all, everyone can kill all the Jewish people. And Mordechai yada et kol asher na'asa, he hears what happens, he tears his clothes, he wears sak ve'efer. Then what happens, right? He can't go to the Shara Melech because he can't go there with a sak. And then it said, V'chol Medina, wherever it is, there's Evel Gadol Yudim, the Jews, right, do tshuva. We talked about that already. And then they come to Esther and they tell her what, right? They tell her what's going on with Mordechai. And her immediate reaction is, Vatitchalchal hamalka ma'od. We're going to darshan that soon. And she sends clothes for him and he won't accept them. And then she calls Hatach, who's her Sarisei Melech, right? He's in charge of her. That it says Asher Ha'emid Lefanea, right? So this Hatach is in charge. We're going to darshan his name as well. Tzaveu Mordechai ladat mazevi al mazeh, which is a very strange line. It says she basically tells Hatach, I'm basically setting up all the drashot and the questions that we're going to ask going forward for today, or at least some of them. She calls Hatach and she says, find out from Mordechai what this is all about. Now, first of all, she says this double language, mazevi al mazeh, right? And what do you mean? She doesn't know what's going on. And she's living in the king's house. She has no clue what's happening. First of all, it could very well be, right? She's in the king's palace and this is all going on outside the palace. And the women, right, have no clue what's happening on the inside of the palace. They have a different life. So maybe, but Gemara has trouble really believing that she doesn't know what it is. So they're going to darshan this some other way. Then Hatach goes out and tells Mordechai, right? Goes to Mordechai to find out. Mordechai tells him all the things that happened. And to say, basically, you should go to the king. Hatach goes back and tells Esther. And obviously, what does Esther say, right? She says, I can't go because everybody knows the rules here. Right? You can't just go to the king if he doesn't ask you, unless he puts out his scepter. And then, right, having been called to the king already 30 days. And then it says, Vayagidu leMordechai tevrei Esther. Mordechai is told what Esther said. Now, it's a little bit strange because what was happening? Hatach was going back and forth. It should be Hatach went to Mordechai. So we're going to try to figure out where was Hatach. Why didn't he go back to Mordechai? And I'll stop there for now, and then we'll go back to the verses soon. So let's start with our drasha. Mordechai yada et asher na'asa. Now, it doesn't say what exactly was it about that happened that got Mordechai so upset that he said, I have to wear clothes, right? You would assume it was, okay, the Jews are going to be killed, but the issue is what exactly pushed his buttons. My Amal. Rav Amal, Gava Haman me'Achashverosh. Okay, that Haman became greater than Achashverosh. He saw much power, that Haman had more power than the king, basically, because he got the king to do whatever he wanted. That's one opinion. Shmuel Amal, Gavar Malka Ila'am Mimalka Tata'a. The Melech above was stronger over the Melech below. The king above overcame the king below. Now, that sounds like a good thing. But this is what we call a euphemism, Lashon Saginahor in Hebrew. It's a euphemism for the opposite. He saw that Achashverosh was stronger than God, right? Because someone say such a thing, right? The Gemara can't write that because that sounds terrible. So unfortunately, we have to explain it because otherwise it makes no sense. We have to say it when we explain it. But the point is they didn't want to write that. So, but what it really means is they saw that Achashverosh won out over God because look, the Jews are all going to be killed. So that was the real tragedy. But what was her reaction? So we're going to see two opinions. Both are physical reactions happened to her. But she immediately started bleeding. Okay, menstrual bleeding, right? Some people, right, when you get all worked up, it could cause someone's period to come on early. That's one opinion. Rabbi Yomi Amar, she had to urinate, right? Sometimes also that happens, right? She had to do it immediately. So, but okay, so she has some sort of physical reaction when she hears this. She calls Hatach. Amarav, Hatach zed Daniel. His real name wasn't Hatach, it's really Daniel. That's who Hatach was, according to the tradition. Right? This is again, the Midrash always tries to limit personalities, right? They want, just like Malachi must be someone else. Also here, Hatach must be someone we know from somewhere else. So they connect him with Daniel. But the question really is, why is his name Hatach then? Why is he called Hatach? It comes from lachtoch, to cut. So what does it mean, cut? So one looks at it positively, one looks at it negatively. One says, Shechatachuhu migdulato. Rav said he was cut from his greatness, and he ends up being, right, to be Esther's saris, right, her eunuch, is like a negative, right? It was a demotion, okay? Shmuel Amal, Shekol Divrei Malchut Nechtachin al Piv. No, he was the main guy. Lachtoch is, it was decided, everything, he would be the man to decide everything, okay? Nothing happened in the house without it going through Hatach. So he was actually someone of much more importance, according to Shmuel. Ladat Mazevi al Mazeh. So again, this is where Esther says, right, what is this exactly? So, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Shachalo, Shema Avru Yisrael HaChamisha Chumshei Torah. Maybe the Jews are deserving of this. Now that she knew what had happened, what she was sending back to Mordechai was, why are you so upset about this? You brought it upon yourselves, basically. Okay, maybe because they're not doing Chamisha Chumshei Torah. What's the connection between Mazeh v'al Mazeh having to do with the Torah? The Luchot, it was right, they were written from both sides. Mizeh u'mizeh. That's why she says, al zeh v'al zeh, right? Ladam Mazeh v'al Mazeh. Why is it double language? To reference a verse about the Luchot. Vayagidu leMordechai et divrei Esther. Ve'ilu ihu lo azal legabe. Well, why? This goes back to what I said, how Hatach doesn't tell Mordechai, he doesn't want to go to tell Mordechai that Esther's not willing to go to the king. Why? This is where we learn that when you have a bad message, you don't really want to be the one to bring it. Send someone else to bring the message, okay? And that's, he had been sent to do a task. He did not succeed in the task. He was nervous to go back himself. Okay, next. Lech kenos et kol hayudim. So now, what does she say? Gather all the Jews. V'gomer ad asher lo chadat. Okay, so now, right, she says, gather all the Jews. You should fast for me, and I will go to the king asher lo chadat. Right? What is asher lo chadat according to the simple reading? Not according to the law, meaning the law of Achashverosh. I'm going to go to him, not according to his laws, because I'm not really supposed to go there unless I was called. But Amar Rabbi Abba, Shalo Kedat, Kedat, we always think of Jewish religion. What does it mean? Not according to the religion. Shalo Kedat haya, shebechol yom vayom ad achshav ba'ones, v'achshav beratzon. Until now, Esther would always go to the king. What does it mean to go to the king? It means to go sleep with the king. Now, until now, every time she went to the king, it was like she was raped. She wasn't interested in sleeping with the king. She was forced to sleep with the king. But now she's actually going on her own volition. Normally, the king would call her and she'd have no choice and she'd go and sleep with him. Now she's the one initiating. She's basically saying, I'm doing this against halacha. Okay, until now, it hasn't really been against halacha. I've been forced to do it. Now I'm doing it beratzon. We're going to get back to this onus and ratzon. And was it really fully okay that she did it being forced to do it? That's another issue. So now, V'kasher avadati. So now why does it say in the double language? Right? And I will be, right, when I will avadati, I'm trying to think of the best way to translate this, but like I was lost, I will be more lost, but it's really more than that. It's right. I will be destroyed almost. Okay. So kashem she'avadati b'beit Abba, just like I'll be wiped out from my father's house for doing this, also kach ovad mimcha, I'm also going to be wiped out from you. In other words, this is the famous thing that in halacha, if you're a married woman and you sleep with somebody else, then you're forbidden also to the person you slept with and to the original husband. So she's basically saying, yeah, perish is a good word. But what she's basically saying is, I'm going to be perished from you. I won't be able to go sleep with you anymore once I do this, because now I'm doing it willingly. The whole thing about Esther being karka olam, I'm not going to get into all that, but that she was passive all the time in the sexual relations. And that's why she didn't really do anything. She was sort of just being used for that, until this point. Now, at this point, she's going on her own, and then it becomes different. But even then, you could say she's still going and initiating, but in the end, she could still be passive in the act of having relations. Anyway, that's a whole other topic that we're not going to get into here. Okay, it comes up in other sugyot. Specifically in the 3 Averot that you're not allowed to do no matter what. And the question is, how did Esther do it? Right? One of them is Giloy Arayot, and they ask, how did Esther do it? And they say she was karka olam, she was passive. Okay, anyway, we'll get into that elsewhere. So now it says, Vayavor Mordechai. Okay, so the verse reads, Vayavar Mordechai, and then he does whatever Esther said. Okay, let me just find the verse. Vayavor Mordechai, Vayas kachol asher tzivta le'Esther. Something weird in that verse. It should just be Vayas Mordechai kachol asher tzivta. And he did, as everyone did, right? But according to this, it says Vayavol. He passed. What does it mean Vayavor? He passed. So what does it mean? Well, how can we darshan this? So Amarav she'evir yom rishon shel Pesach b'ta'anit. He did an avera, transgression, because the dates, according to the tradition, are that Yud Nisan was the day that the letters, the edicts were written and sent. Then Rashi says, Yud b'Nisan dichtivu ha'igro b'nitan adat b'Shushan. That was just before where we started reading today. Arba'asar v'chamishashar v'shishasar hitanu. The next 3 days they fasted. One of those days was Pesach, the holiday of Pesach, where not only are you supposed to eat because it's a holiday, also you're supposed to eat matzah. And some people say, why don't they say he didn't eat matzah? They really say he fasted, and that was the problem because it was a holiday and you're not allowed to fast on a holiday. But it was even worse because he didn't even eat matzah if that was the case. So anyway, that's Vayavor. Shmuel Amal, de avar arkuma demaya. He had to pass over like a channel of water. Maybe again, that shows how challenging it was to him to do it, and he did it anyway. I guess that's the gist of this one. We already saw this drasha, but we'll see it again. It should have said clothing. She wears royal clothing. What does it mean? She wore royalty. There's no such thing as wearing royalty. So Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina, pay attention, because he now is going to say, we're going to quote a slew of things that Rabbi Elazar says in the name of Rabbi Chanina. Okay, she went in with Ruach HaKodesh. We'll see later that her Ruach HaKodesh leaves her at a certain point, but she goes in with Ruach HaKodesh, with God with her. This could be also trying to justify how she went in willingly to go sleep with him, right? That Ruach HaKodesh was kind of bringing her along. Here we go off on a tangent, although interestingly, some of the statements by him are going to relate to the Purim story, but some of them not at all, or at least seemingly on the surface, not at all. Okay, the bracha of a simple person should never be seen lightly. This is why people love getting brachot, right? Give me a blessing, because even a blessing of a simple person, right? Some people go to big rabbis to get blessings, but some people, right, or mekubalim or something, but other people, right, are just happy anybody gives them a bracha. Here you see why. Sharei. See a bunch of situations. Were 2 great people who were blessed by 2 more simple people, and their blessings came true. David Daniel. David Debracha Arvana. This is Arvana Yevusi. He blesses him. And he basically says, you'll be blessed. And then David is actually saved from this magefa, from this plague. And then Daniel, Debarche, Daryavish, Dachtiv, Ela, Dianat, Palachle, Betadira, the God who you, right? Daryavish says to him, the God who you pray to regularly, Yishazvinach. will basically save you, and he gets saved from the lion's den. So there you see that they each got a bracha, and the bracha was fulfilled, even though it was a simple person. Interesting, both are not, maybe, well, especially Daryavish was a king, but again, in the world of Judaism, he wasn't an important Jew. He wasn't a Jew at all. Another thing, and this is the flip, don't think that just because someone curses you, if they're a simple person, it's not going to come true, but it's actually very strong. Avimelech cursed Sarah. Remember, this is the whole thing we talked about before. She was beautiful. They hid her, right? And then, there was Paro, and then there was also with Avimelech. And Avimelech says to her, he gives her all these gifts, but he says a little underhandedly, according to the way they darshan this, this will be to cover your eyes. Okay, now, to cover your eyes, they say, and it happened, and it came true with her children. He couldn't see. So basically he said, this will cover your eyes. That meant someone will be blinded by this, okay? And her son, in fact, becomes blind. That's one translation. Another, I think, more interesting translation is, L'chasot einayim is, right, to pull the wool over someone's eyes is to trick them. And what he's saying is someone will trick one of your children, and that's Yitzchak. And they quote from the beginning of the section where he gets tricked because he can't see, and then Yaakov tricks him and makes him believe that he's Esav. So it could be also not necessarily physically blind, but it means someone will trick you, pull the wool over your eyes. God is not the same as humans. Midat basar v'dam, again, these are totally unrelated to our Purim story. Adam shofet k'derah v'achar kach noten l'tocha mayim. You put up a pot on the fire and then you add water to it. Now, we don't always do this. We sometimes put the water in the pot and then put it on, but I guess that's the way they did it. Or I think what it might really mean, if you look at the analogy after to what God does, I think it might mean that you wouldn't put water on the fire without there being a pot there, right? Imagine putting water on a fire without a pot. You'll basically put out the fire. I think that's what it means. God does the opposite. God put lots of water in the skies, and then it says after that, and then the ananim. In other words, first he put the water, and then he put the clouds to basically hold the water. This goes back to what we talked about, the water and the clouds and all that, and how the rain comes. Anyway, God does it in a different order. Now we're going to get back to the Megillah. If you say something in the name of someone who said it, you bring redemption to the world. Right? She told the king that these two men were planning to kill him in the name of Mordechai, and that basically saved the Jewish people. So you see, you can bring redemption to the world by doing that. If a righteous person leaves this world, he's lost to his generation, but the fact that the tzaddik exists, he still exists somehow and is affecting other people in the world. So his loss is really only felt to those of his generation. It's like a person who loses a pearl. Now I lose a pearl, the pearl is still in existence, it's somewhere else, someone else is benefiting from it, just I've lost it. That's the analogy. Really back now to our psukim in the Megillah. So now it says, Haman says, all this is not worth it to me when I see Mordechai, right? And he doesn't bow down to me. So we're going to have a whole bunch of Kifur Drashot about this. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina. We're still in the middle of all his statements. Bisha'a shara'a Haman et Mordechai yoshev b'shar hamelech Amar kol ze eino shaveli. Kidirav Chisda. So what we want to understand is Haman was this great, really important person. Why did one person get him so upset? So they say, like Rav Chisda said, the Amar Rav Chisda, zeba b'prus buli, zeba b'prus buti. Okay, one came with his wealth and one came with his poverty. Okay, what does this mean? There's a midrash that's told, there's a nice footnote in the Quran, if you have it, that describes the whole story. Midrash that's told that basically Haman was basically, both of them were sent out to war by Achashverosh, and they were soldiers together. And Haman used to be a barber and a bathhouse attendant. And then he goes out to war, and he basically, like you see in these movies, these army officers that basically go out and they're with women and they do all these other things. And he basically squanders all his money, and he ends up having to sell himself into slavery to Mordechai. And Mordechai basically enslaves him until he basically gets out. And then he becomes, and he Gidal Melech Haman, basically Achashverosh makes him prominent, and he goes back and he becomes wealthy and all that. But the point is that whenever he saw Mordechai reminded him of the time when he was enslaved. And that's why every time he saw Mordechai, it got him so upset. This is what they say. He was an Eved that sold himself for bread. Okay, he basically had no money. Now, what's this kol zeh? What's zeh? Zeh is usually, we've seen this many, many times in the Gemara, where zeh, like zeh zot hamenorah, it means you're pointing to something physical. It's not, right? We understand kol zeh no shaveli, all the honor that I've gotten, all the prominence. It's not talking about that. It must be talking about something actual. So what is the actual thing? He had a list that he hung on his neck with a list of all his wealth. Okay, this is because after he was poor, he was so excited he was wealthy. He had a list of everything he owned. But then he would say, none of this is worth it to me, meaning all my wealth is not worth it when I see Mordechai, because again, he reminds me of what I was then. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina. We're still on comments of his. He's now talking about tzaddikim in the future, okay, and the redemption, the future redemption. God will basically be a crown on the heads of all the righteous people. Shenemar. Okay, I'll read you the whole pasuk. Okay, on that day in the future, Yeshayahu Perek Kafchet, God will be a crown of glory, and they both basically mean a crown of glory, okay, in different words, so crown of beauty, to the remnants of his people. So now we're going to darshan this pasuk. Why does it say both of them? La'osim tzivyono. Tzvi is a reference to tzivyono, which is God's will. Ulemitzapin, tzvira, like is mitzapim, those who are seeking, waiting for tifarto, for his glory, basically for God's redemption. So now they say, right, so that's basically the tzaddikim. So he'll be a crown for the tzaddikim. Yacholakol, you might have thought to everybody, all the tzaddikim. Tamulomar lish'ar amo, not to all the tzaddikim, only lish'ar amo. What is sha'ar? The remnants. It's a reference to l'misha masim atzmo kishirayim, someone who makes himself to be like a remnant, meaning showing I'm not important. This is again against haughtiness. Maybe they're talking about this because Haman was so haughty, and that brought his downfall somewhat, but maybe, I don't know, even though this is obviously about Jews. Now we're going to darshan the next verse. Uleruach mishpat, this is the next verse in Yeshayahu. Uleruach mishpat zeh hadan et yitzro. Okay, so now they say this is a list of all the characteristics of these righteous people that in the end will get saved. They're people who will end up with this crown on their heads. God will crown himself on their heads. Leruach mishpat zeh hadan et yitzro. This is someone who puts up on trial his yetzer, his evil inclination, and basically it means he repents. Liyoshev al hamishpat zeh hadan dinem et lamito. This is someone who judges a true judgment. Uli gvura zeh hamitgaber al yitzro. We know gvura is always associated, or certainly in Pirkei Avot, right? Ezu gibor koveshik yitzro. This is similar to the other one, but he judges his yetzer. He overcomes his evil inclination. Mishivei milchama. This is just quoting parts of that next verse. Shenos'im v'notnim b'milchamta shel Torah. Those who are learning Torah, fighting the battles of Torah, trying to argue with their chavrusas over what the real meaning of the Torah is. And sha'ara, that's the last word in the pasuk, to the gates. What gates are we talking about? Elu talmidei chachamim shemashkimim u'ma'arivim bebatei knesiyot u'bebatei midrashot. It means they're in the gates of the shuls and the batei midrash. Okay, now comes this conversation, which there's two ways of reading it. There's some who take out an entire sentence here. We're assuming this is connected to the previous because they're now going to quote the third verse in Yeshayahu in that sequence. So, manishtanu elu me'elu. How are these different from those? Okay, now, so if you get rid of the next line, then you can read it as, how are the tzaddikim that will get the crowns different from the tzaddikim that won't get the crowns? And then you skip to Amar Le, God answers him. Skip the next whole line. Gam ele b'yayin shagu b'shechar ta'u paku plila. Also, those got drunk, meaning the tzaddikim that won't get saved, the ones who were haughty, they ended up also getting drunk and kind of veering off the path. Paku plila, what is paku plila? And paku ele gehenom. Paku is a reference to hell. Shene'amar v'lo tiyeh zot lecha lefuka. We just had that yesterday with Abigail. She said, I don't want this to be a stumbling block for you, she says to David. Ve'ein pliliya ele dayanim. Shene'amar v'natam b'plili, meaning they will get judged to gehenom, these people. So that's one answer. A different way of reading it is that the line that we ignored is really in there, which is, and then it has to do with something that seems like it's an entirely different sugya almost. It just quotes the next verse, which is midat. It's a conversation between the midat hadin, which is the attribute of justice, is talking to God and saying, why are you being nice to the Jewish people, right? What's bein elu le'elu is what's in between the Jews and the Gentiles, which also maybe connects to the story of Purim, right? Where the Jews went out over the Gentiles. And God says, the Jews learn Torah and the Gentiles don't, to which, and in this version, the midat hadin gets in the last word and says, no, what are you talking about? Even your people who are oskim b'Torah, they also got drunk and left the path, and they're not really so great. And then it's a little bit weird because it ends with this negative that the Jews are deserving of Gehenom. Okay, so two different ways to read that sugya. All right, as opposed to the other one, God has the last word, and he basically says that's the difference between, right, there's righteous people that are really righteous, and then there's righteous people that end up leaving the path. Okay, now we get to the moment where Esther, right, the critical moment of the Megillah, Esther is about to venture into the king, right? And she goes to the Chatzar Beit HaMelech HaPnimit, Amar Rabbi Levi, Kevan Shigia LeBeit HaTzlamim, Nistalkai Men HaShechina. Remember, she's wearing Malchut, she's wearing the Ruach HaKodesh. And then she gets to the house of idols of the king. That's the Chatzar Beit HaMelech HaPnimit. We assume there were idols there. God leaves her. And now we basically get to this Perek Tehillim, and we've talked about before, Tehillim Kafbet. You can open it and look inside if you want. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's attributed to Esther, and for exactly this moment when she goes, and she says, Amar Eli Eli lama zavtani. That's a quote from the Mizmor. God, why did you leave me? Right? So they're saying, when did God leave her? Oh, it must have been she went into the house of idols and God left her. And she starts saying, why did you leave me? Shema ata. Now she starts to wonder, right? What did I do wrong? And what does she say? And this goes back to what we saw before. Shema ata dan al shogeg kimizi va'al ones kiratzon. Maybe you're judging people even on being forced to do something, right? As if they did it on purpose. In other words, I was forced, but maybe you think that I did it willingly, or you don't care that I did it unwillingly. Maybe it's all the same. And this is a reference to famous Gemara in Baba Kama, or it's actually a Mishnah, Adam muad la'olam, bein shogeg, bein mizid, bein ones, bein baratzon. People are always responsible for their actions. It doesn't matter if they were forced. It doesn't matter if they did it willingly. It doesn't matter if they were unwitting about it. It doesn't matter if they were intentional about it. All the same when it comes to God. So that's what she basically says. I didn't do this on purpose, but maybe you're judging me that you don't really care. Oh, or maybe it's a different issue. And this is a reference to things it says in the Tehillim there. Maybe al shekarativ kelev. Maybe you're saying I didn't give enough respect to Achashverosh because I called him a dog. Where does she call him a dog? Right? The dog is always the worst of the Gemara. Shenemar hatzila micherev nafshi. In the Tehillim there, she says, save me from the sword of my soul, miyad kelev yechidati, from the dog. So meaning, right, the one and only dog, meaning she called Achashverosh a dog. Now, why do we think that maybe this is what she thinks? Because then the next verse says, chazra v'karato aryeh, shenema hoshieni mipi aryeh. First she says, save me from the dog. Then she says, save me from the lion. Why did she switch from dog to lion? Maybe it was as she was walking through and the God left her and she thought, oh, maybe I made a mistake in calling him a dog and I really should have called him a lion. It's totally different, right? These are two very different tracks here of what she is wondering what she did wrong. Now, what happens? He sees her. Now, what's the problem? First of all, she's fasted for 3 days. She probably looks awful. And she goes into the king. And what happens, right? He takes out his scepter and the scepter reaches out to her, right? It reaches her. So now, according to the Midrash, we're going to see here, it didn't really reach her so easily. What was the issue? The issue was she got scared and didn't want to walk any further into the room. So she needed some help. 3 angels come along and help her. Think about those people who do surgery on their neck, right? Plastic surgery, right? One stretched up her neck so she didn't look, she looked better. Made her look like, gave her, I don't know exactly how you describe it, but she had a certain chen about her, a certain grace about her. And one stretched out the scepter. The scepter wasn't that long, had to reach her, but she was far away. So basically, what they had to do is extend the scepter so it would reach her because she got scared and didn't want to move. So, how far did they have to stretch the scepter? We're going to see, I think it's 5 different answers. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Shtei amot haya, v'hemido al 12. It was 2 amot long, and it became 12. V'amri la al 16. Some people say 16. Amri la al 24, 24 amot. V'matnita tana al 60. And one said it was 60 amot long. You see the same thing happening, like the Amah Baparo, which was just in the parsha, and like the teeth of the evil people of Rishaim, Dechtiv, Shinei Rishaim Shibarta, which the simple reading is God broke the teeth of our enemies. That you made longer. Okay, that first they become really long, and then God even saves us. Rabba Barofan Amar Rishum Rabbi Eliezer, Sheshama Merabo V'Rabo Merabo. Here's the last answer, Matayim. It went 200 amot long. Okay, that's a real exaggeration, right? But again, they want to show how great a miracle it was. Okay, next. Vayomer laha melech le'Esther HaMalka, ma bakashatech al chatzi ha'malchut v'te'as. Right, this is the famous line. He says, "What do you want? I'll give you up to half the kingdom." Why didn't he say, "I'll give you the whole kingdom"? Right? Why did he say only up to half? He didn't want to offer her everything. He was only telling her up to half. And not anything that will split the malchut into two. Okay, and what's that? Binyan Beit HaMikdash. I'm not going to let you rebuild the temple. Now, what's going on here? I think what's going on is the rabbis are trying to figure out, why didn't Esther ask if she could get anything? Why didn't she ask to rebuild the temple? That was what they needed in that time. So they say, she didn't ask because he wasn't offering them. Okay, why is that going to split the kingdom? Either it'll cause a big rebellion between his people, or some people say, remember, he ruled over the whole world, and what's in the center of the world? Israel, according to the tradition, right? So the Beit HaMikdash is in the center of the world, and therefore I'm saying up to half point. This is in the half point. You can't get the half point, which is a remez to, an allusion to the Beit HaMikdash. Yavo HaMelech v'Haman al HaMishteh. Here's maybe the most interesting part of today's daf. Why did she invite Haman to the party? So why is this interesting? Because there's 12 answers. Okay, here we go. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Pachim tamnalo, shene'emal yishu chanam l'fnehem lepach. Right? Always at parties, people get drunk. That's the way to slip people up. And that was what she thought. I'll get him drunk, and he'll do something stupid, and that will get him killed. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, mi beit avia lamda. She learned from her house. Some people say, Rashi says, from it's everything's all little kids learn. Shene'emal im ra'ev sonacha chileu lechem. Right? This could be explained, right? If your enemy's hungry, give him bread. What does that mean? Well, there's, the mean approach, and there's the nice approach. Be nice to whoever hates you, and that sometimes will get them to stop hating you. And maybe then he'll, in a nice way, decide to stop what he's doing. Rabbi Meir Omer, Kedei shelo litol etzav yimrod. If he wasn't there, he'd get wind of what was going on, and then he'd plot and he'd be able to rebel. If he's there, he won't have anyone to advise him. He won't have any way to plan. It'll just happen right then and there. He'll have no time to plan. That's a better way to get him, right? And not let him have time to kind of plot what he's going to do against. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Kedei shelo yakiru ba she Yehudit. She wanted people to know she was Jewish. What's the best way to do that? Invite the biggest enemy of the Jews. And they'll say, oh, if we thought she was Jewish, she's certainly not Jewish if she's inviting Haman to the party. Rabbi Nechemia Omer, right? So basically not to blow her cover. Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Kedei shelo yomru Yisrael achot. This is a great one. Achot yesh lanu b'beit hamelech v'yasichu da'atam min harachamim. She didn't want the Jews to stop praying. So she says, if I invite Haman, they'll say, what the heck is going on? We better really work hard to get this removed, right? If not, if they see she's in control, they'll say, oh, well, let her handle it. We don't have to do anything. She didn't want that to happen. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Kedei shehem matzuela b'chol eit. She wanted him next to her so she could kind of make sure that things went the way she wanted. Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe Omer, Ulai yargish hamakom v'yaseh lanu nes. Maybe God will see how much I have to disgrace myself by inviting him, and he'll see how bad things are, that he'll come and redeem me. Well, she gives two different interpretations there, but we'll stick with that. Rabbi Shua ben Korchomer, Asbir lo panim kedei she'areg hu v'hi. I'm willing to sacrifice my life so that he'll get killed, basically meaning the king will be jealous of both of them, think something's going on, and then he'll kill both of us, and at least if he kills Haman, that will be the end of the gzerah. Some people say it's because Rashi gives two explanations, and one of them is based on what we saw earlier. As soon as a gzerah, the person who makes the decree dies, remember one of the Roman officers died and then they got rid of the decree. So here she felt once Haman dies, the decree will be null and void. Rabban Gamliel Omer, and then she's willing to sacrifice her own life as well. Rabban Gamliel says, Melech Hafchefan Haya. He was a guy, we know Achashverosh, he's flippant. So you just never know. And if she gets him in the right moment, he'll kill Haman right then and there. If Haman, he has to go find him. By the time he finds him, he'll change his mind. Amar Rabban Gamliel, even though he just gave his answer, he says, Adayin tzruchim anu lemodai. Still need Rabbi Lazar Modai, who says, Tanya Rabbi Lazar Modai Omer, kin ato b'melech, kin ato b'sarim. All that explains why she invited Haman. It doesn't explain why she didn't invite anyone else. So here it explains she wanted to make him jealous by the king, by inviting him, and make him the king to be jealous of Haman, and all the other officers to be jealous of Haman. Why did he get invited and I didn't? In that way, everyone would hate him, and then nobody would be on his side. Rabba Omer, Lefnei Shever Gaon, we're up to 11. Before the breaking is usually haughtiness. So if she invites him to the party, he'll feel so great about himself, and then he'll go down. There's a pasuk from Yirmiyahu that basically in the heat of this was Belshazzar, after he kills two kings, then he goes and parties and then he dies at the part because of the party. So that often brings people's downfall. According to who did she go? So they say, in other words, this is right. If you're going to ask Eliyahu any question, it's going to be this. So really, why did Esther invite Haman? And what does he answer? According to all of these were all different reasons that Esther had for inviting Haman. They're all right. Okay. Okay, now we have Haman saying all right about his many sons. Now, 10 sons is not a lot. You might think it's a lot, but in those days it was not a lot. So the Gemara is going to say, how many sons did he have? Amarav shloshim. He actually had 30. Asara metu, 10 died. Asara nitzlu, 10 were hung. And asara mechazrim al aptachim, and 10 ended up being poor and knocking on doors. Rabbanan amre, otan shemechazrim al aptachim shiv'im havya. There were 70 of them who were left, who were basically beggars. Tichtiv sve'im belechem niskaru. This is from the Shira of Hannah, song, the her tefillah, and it says that this is the commentaries say this is an allusion to it alludes to the sons of Haman, that they basically had to be sold for bread. It's a reference to Haman from the story before. So al tukre sve'im ela shiv'im, right? But read it as 70, and that's how they get 70. Okay, this is just like the Sharvit. It's just all these different opinions, how much exaggeration there is. There were 208. Shneimar v'rov banav, right? Rov banav, rov is virov is in gematria 208. To which they say, wait, virov b'gematria matayim v'arbesar havu. It's not 208, it's 214. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak virov k'tiv. It's written without the vav in between the resh and the bet. And that gets us to that. Okay, we're going to stop here. We're going to start tomorrow with Balai Lahuna Didash Natamelech. Who couldn't fall asleep? Why couldn't they fall asleep? We'll get into that tomorrow. We'll stop here for today. Have a great day.